What if everything you thought you knew about locks was wrong? We often picture them as simple tools for keeping people out, but ancient cultures saw something far deeper. This journey explores 25 ancient locking mechanisms that were not designed for physical security. They were messages, spiritual guardians, and sacred boundaries. You will discover a hidden history where locks protected vows to the gods, contained cosmic energy, and sealed social contracts. We will uncover why a flimsy wooden bolt in an Egyptian tomb was more powerful than a modern steel door, and how a simple knot could hold back immense spiritual force. By the end, you will never look at a key the same way again. What did our ancestors believe was truly worth locking away? Deep within the stifling silence of a pharaoh's tomb, a massive stone door stood not just as a barrier, but as a boundary between worlds. The mechanism holding it shut was often surprisingly simple. A wooden or stone bolt slid into place. To our modern eyes, it looks flimsy, almost insultingly easy to break. But that was precisely the point. This bolt seal was not a test of engineering strength. It was a test of spiritual will. Its true power lay not in the wood or stone, but in the ceremony that surrounded it. Priests acting as intermediaries for the gods would perform intricate rituals to consecrate this simple latch, transforming it from a physical object into a sacred contract. Breaking this seal was not merely breaking a piece of wood, it was tearing a contract with the divine, an act of sacrilege that invited cosmic consequences far worse than any human punishment. The lock was a message, a warning written in physical form. Its fragility was a deliberate choice, making any violation a conscious and blatant act. The real security system was not the mechanism itself, but the immense weight of spiritual fear it represented, a force field of belief designed to maintain the cosmic order for eternity. This same principle of a sacred contract, written not in fear but in hope, echoed through the sun-drenched forums of ancient Rome. Here, amidst the clamor of daily life, a citizen might pause before a small, ornate stone box, an edicula. They were not there to store wealth, but to secure a promise. A merchant fearing a winter sea voyage might vow a generous offering to Neptune if he returned safely. A mother might pledge a public feast to Juno if her child recovered from a fever. These vows were carefully inscribed onto thin sheets of lead, a metal as permanent as the promise itself. The act of rolling up that tablet and sliding it through a narrow slot into the stone box was deeply significant. But the most important part was the simple iron lock that secured the box's only door. That lock was not there to stop a thief. A lead plaque had no value to anyone but the person who made the vow and the god who witnessed it. Its purpose was entirely symbolic. By turning the key, the individual was transforming a private, whispered hope into a public, unbreakable contract with the divine. The click of the lock was the sound of a promise becoming official, witnessed by the community and binding under the watchful eyes of the gods. To break that vow after locking it away was not merely a personal failure, it was an act of impiety that could invite divine retribution. The lock served as the ultimate guarantor, a physical manifestation of one's honor and faith, ensuring that a word given to the gods could not easily be taken back. From the solemn vows of Rome, we travel to a celebration of life itself. In the courts of Ming and Qing dynasty China, a lock was not a tool of restriction, but a beautiful key to a prosperous future. These were the heaven and earth locks, exquisitely crafted from silver or bronze, their surfaces often etched with poetic inscriptions or symbols of longevity. They were not made for doors or chests, but for people. Given as gifts at weddings or the birth of a child, these locks were tangible blessings, the very name heaven and earth reveals their profound purpose. They symbolized the perfect, harmonious union of yin and yang, the celestial and the earthly, the masculine and the feminine. To bestow such a lock was to wish for the recipient a life in balance with the cosmos itself. The locking mechanism was the heart of the ritual, yet its function was completely inverted. After the delicate clasp was closed, the key was often deliberately discarded, thrown into a river as an offering, or kept separately as a personal charm. The lock was meant to stay shut forever. Why would you create a lock only to throw away the key because its purpose was not to be opened? The act of locking was the blessing, a ritual meant to permanently secure good fortune, health, and happiness within the recipient's life. The lock became a permanent, beautiful anchor, a physical object that held a wish in place against the currents of fate. Its security was not against thieves, but against misfortune. This transforms the very essence of a lock from a device of denial into a vessel of hope. Its beautiful, unopenable form a constant reminder of a community's love and its wishes for a harmonious life. Across the Mediterranean, in the heart of an ancient Greek city, the temple treasury stood as a monument to both piety and power. Its heavy doors were secured not with a simple key, but with an intricate seal of clay or wax, pressed firmly with the unique signet ring of a priest or a public official. To a modern observer, this might look like a primitive security system, a fragile barrier protecting gold and silver offerings from thieves, but that interpretation misses the entire point. The true guardian of this wealth was not the hardened clay, but the divine presence of the temple's god, like Athena or Apollo. The seal was less a lock and more a sophisticated administrative device, a physical contract. Its primary function was to create an undeniable record of access. If the seal was found broken, the question was not just what was stolen, but who had broken the sacred protocol. An intact seal meant the offerings inside remained under the god's watchful eye and the community's collective responsibility. The consequences of breaking it were therefore immense, but not in the way we might think. A thief would face human justice, but any official who broke the seal without proper authorization committed a far greater crime, an act of impiety that insulted the deity and shattered public trust. The seal transformed the treasury from a simple storeroom into a sacred space of accountability. Its unbroken surface was a silent testament to civic order and religious respect, a declaration that the community's vows to the gods were being honored with absolute integrity. This was a lock that served as an open invitation for divine oversight, its strength drawn entirely from the honor of those it was meant to oversee. Yet even a lock designed for divine theater could not contain the most subtle and powerful force of all, a human promise. In the great cathedrals that housed these sacred relics, another kind of lock existed, one that secured a vow made not to a saint, but to God himself. High on a stone pillar or tucked away in a secluded chapel, you might find a small, unassuming metal box. This was the vow box, and its lock was perhaps the most personal of all. A knight about to depart for the Crusades would inscribe his pledge on a scrap of parchment. A merchant seeking forgiveness for a grave sin would write out his oath of penance. The act of sealing that promise inside the box, of hearing the lock click shut, was a moment of profound gravity. The lock here served a dual purpose, both practical and deeply symbolic. Practically, it prevented the whispered vows from being seen by gossiping eyes, preserving the individual's privacy with God. But symbolically, its power was immense. By locking the vow away, the individual was entrusting it to the church and, by extension, to heaven. It was no longer a private thought that could be forgotten or rationalized away. It was now a formal contract, a spiritual debt that had been officially recorded. The key was held by a priest, a representative of divine authority. This system transformed a personal intention into a binding communal fact. The lock was not a barrier to keep people out, but a sacred container to hold a soul's most solemn commitment, ensuring that a word given in a moment of fear or faith would echo into eternity. But a vow locked in a church was a stationary promise anchored to one place. In the flowing world of Edo period Japan, personal security took on a different, more fluid form. A nobleman or merchant, dressed in the elegant layers of a kimono which had no pockets, needed a way to carry his essential personal items. The solution was a masterpiece of functional art known as the Inro. This was not a box or a pouch, but a stack of small, nested compartments, meticulously crafted from lacquered wood and often decorated with scenes from nature or mythology. It was suspended from the wearer's sash by a silk cord. The locking mechanism for this precious container was a study in elegant simplicity. There was no key, no bolt. Instead, security came from a single, beautifully carved bead called an ogive. By sliding this bead down the cords that ran through the Inro's compartments, the wearer could tension the entire stack, holding it firmly shut. The cord was then anchored by a netsuke, a sculpted toggle that rested on the rim of the sash, preventing the entire assembly from slipping through. This system was not designed to withstand a determined attack. A thief could simply cut the cord. Its true genius lay in its situational security. The Inro was meant to protect its contents from the jostle of a crowded street or the motion of a journey, to prevent the accidental spill of medicines or personal seals. The real lock was the garment itself and the social context. The Inro was worn prominently, a clear signal of the wearer's status and refined taste. Its intricate design was a form of social armor, broadcasting that the owner was a person of consequence. To tamper with it would be a profound breach of etiquette, a social transgression as serious as any legal crime. This was security through integration, where protection was woven into the very fabric of daily life, beauty, and custom, proving that a lock could be as much a statement of identity as a barrier against loss. Far from the refined courts of Japan, a very different kind of lock was being forged in the fire and ice of the Viking world. Imagine a warrior standing on a windswept Scandinavian shore, his longship waiting to carry him across treacherous seas. Before departing, he does something that seems counterintuitive. He does not take his most valued possessions with him for luck or trade. Instead, he carefully places them inside a heavy wooden chest, lowers it into a hole dug near his home, and secures it with a simple iron strap lock. To an archaeologist centuries later, this lock appears almost useless. It is a basic clasp easily broken with a determined blow. It could never protect the chest's contents from a serious grave robber. But that was never its purpose. The true power of this act lay in the ritual itself. By locking the chest and burying it, the Viking was performing a profound act of spiritual anchoring. He was tethering his very soul, his identity, and his legacy to the land of his ancestors. The flimsy lock was a physical promise, a vow made to himself and his family that he would return. It safeguarded not the objects inside, but the idea of home. The chest represented the life he intended to reclaim. If he perished on his journey, the locked chest became a silent testament, a buried seed of his memory waiting to be discovered, ensuring that his name and his story would not be lost to the sea. This was a lock that held a life in place, its symbolic strength far outweighing its physical weakness. Centuries before the first metal key was forged, merchants in the bustling cities of Mesopotamia were perfecting a different kind of lock. Theirs was not for doors or chests, but for promises. The system revolved around a simple ball of clay known as a bulla. picture a merchant agreeing to deliver 10 jars of olive oil in 3 months. To formalize this, he would take 10 small, distinct clay tokens, each one symbolizing a single jar. These tokens were not the contract itself, they were the raw data. He would then place them inside a hollow sphere of wet clay, sealing the information away. But the crucial step came next. While the clay was still soft, he would roll his unique cylinder seal across its surface, leaving an intricate, personalized pattern. This sealed ball was the lock. Its purpose was not to protect the tokens, which were worthless on their own, but to secure the integrity of the agreement. The bulla was a physical container for truth, designed to prevent memory from fading or intentions from shifting. To verify the contract, the only way was to break the clay envelope, shattering the seal's impression forever. This act of destruction was the key. It forced absolute transparency, revealing the exact tokens placed inside at the moment of the agreement. The security did not come from the strength of the clay, but from the uniqueness of the seal. Forging that intricate pattern was nearly impossible, making the bulla an early form of cryptographic security for vital information. This was a lock that authenticated reality itself, a conceptual leap that transformed a simple handshake into a verifiable record, laying the very foundation for the legal and financial systems we rely on today. The Mesopotamian bulla secured a commercial truth, but what about knowledge considered too potent for just anyone to handle? Within the vaulted halls of an Ottoman imperial library, a scholar might approach a reading desk to find a priceless manuscript of philosophy or astronomy physically chained in place. The chain itself was often attached to a small, beautifully crafted lock on the book's cover or the desk itself. At first glance, this seems like a straightforward security measure to prevent the theft of a precious hand-copied text. But the true purpose was far more nuanced. In a culture where books were copied by scribes, the physical object, while valuable, was not the primary concern. Its real power was the knowledge it contained. The lock was not a barrier against theft, but a filter for understanding. It served as a gatekeeper, ensuring that only those with the proper credentials, a recommendation from a librarian or an imam, could be entrusted with the key. This was especially true for works dealing with complex theology, advanced mathematics, or speculative philosophy, ideas that could be dangerously misinterpreted by someone without the proper intellectual and spiritual training. The lock transformed the act of reading from a simple acquisition of information into a privileged, curated experience. It physically embodied the concept of a hierarchy of knowledge, a recognition that some truths required preparation and guidance to be grasped safely. The delicate mechanism was a silent testament to the belief that knowledge itself was a sacred trust, and its protection was not about hoarding, but about ensuring it fell into the right hands where it could enlighten rather than corrupt. These intricate Celtic patterns present a mystery that defies simple mechanics. Crafted from gleaming bronze or silver, the surfaces of sacred boxes and ceremonial talks are alive with endlessly looping lines, woven together so perfectly that the beginning and end of any single strand are impossible to find. To call this a lock seems almost misleading, as there is no keyhole, no bolt, no discernible point of entry. Its security was not based on force, but on profound symbolism. The unbroken knot was a physical representation of an eternal bond, perhaps a pledge of loyalty to a chieftain, a vow between lovers, or a connection to the divine. To open it by force would be to destroy the very meaning it held. The true key was not a metal object, but a sequence of hidden knowledge. The owner might know to press a specific intersection of metal strands in a certain order, or to twist a particular loop with a precise motion. This transformed the act of opening from a simple task into a ritual. Unlocking the box became a meditative puzzle, a reaffirmation of one's right to access what was inside. The security of the knot lock lay in its obscurity. A thief would be confronted not with a barrier to break, but with a beautiful, silent enigma. Its strength was intellectual and spiritual, designed to be bypassed only by someone who understood the deeper connection it represented, turning a functional object into a tangible expression of faith and belonging. Deep beneath the sun-scorched plains of ancient Persia, survival itself flowed through a hidden network of tunnels known as Qanats. These incredible underground canals, hand-dug over generations, tapped into distant mountain aquifers, carrying the gift of water to the heart of desert communities. But this precious resource created a new challenge: how to share it fairly among every farm and family. The solution was a lock of remarkable ingenuity, one designed not for secrecy but for transparency. At key distribution points along the Qanat, where the life-giving water was channeled to different fields, a simple stone or clay mechanism was placed over the channel opening. This was not a complex device with a key. It was a calibrated plug or a sliding gate, its settings carefully measured. The guardian of this system was not a soldier, but a community-appointed watermaster, a person whose authority came from trust and deep knowledge. His role was to adjust the lock according to a strict, pre-established roster, ensuring that each farmer received their precise and scheduled share of the water. The lock's true purpose was to remove human bias and temptation from the equation. It physically enforced a covenant of fairness, transforming a potential source of conflict into a tool of cooperation. The security it provided was not against outsiders, but against the internal strife that scarcity breeds. By making the distribution system visible and mechanical, the lock became an instrument of justice, ensuring that the community's collective effort in building the Qanat was matched by an equitable sharing of its rewards. Its click was the sound of social order, a guarantee that the desert would bloom for everyone. The flowing water of the Qanat was a shared, physical truth, but how do you lock away a story or a number? High in the Andes, the Inca Empire managed a vast territory without a single piece of paper or a written word as we know it. Their entire administration, from census data to epic poems, was secured within an astonishing device, the Quipu. At first glance, a Quipu looks nothing like a lock. It is a collection of hanging cords, often made of cotton or llama wool, with a series of intricate knots tied along their lengths. But this deceptively simple object was one of the most sophisticated informational locks ever created. Its security was not physical but entirely cerebral. The true mechanism was the complex code understood only by a special class of record keepers known as the Quipu. These individuals were the living keys to the empire's memory. They knew that the position of a knot, the color of a cord, the type of knot used, and even the spin of the fiber itself could represent a population count, a tribute payment, or a chapter from a sacred history. For anyone else, a Quipu was just a bundle of strings. It could be carried openly without fear of its secrets being stolen, because the information was locked behind a barrier of specialized knowledge. This system transformed sensitive data into an unbreakable cipher. The Quipu did not just record information, it authorized it, ensuring that only those trained and trusted by the state could access the true narrative of the empire. The lock was the knowledge itself, and its keeper held the power to open the past. The intricate knots of a Quipu secured knowledge through pure intellect, but other locks were designed to contain forces far less tangible. Within the quiet heart of an African village, a specially woven basket might be stored in a dark, secluded hut. Its lid is not fastened with a metal clasp, but sealed with a complex pattern of braided fibers and sacred beads. To an outsider, this closure appears decorative, even fragile. but to the community, it is one of the most powerful locks imaginable. Inside rests a ceremonial mask, an object believed not merely to represent a spirit or an ancestor, but to temporarily become a vessel for its living essence. The woven closure on the box is not there to prevent theft. Its purpose is to act as a spiritual seal, a barrier designed to contain the immense energy housed within the mask after a ritual is complete. This power is not meant for everyday life. It is too potent, too raw for the uninitiated to encounter. The lock's true function is to protect the community from the very object it safeguards. Only a village elder, someone who has undergone years of training and understands the precise rituals for handling such power, is permitted to untie the sacred bonds. The act of untying is itself a ceremony, a careful process of decompressing the spiritual force held inside. The security of this lock does not come from the strength of its fibers, but from the weight of tradition and the deep-seated taboo against violating this sacred boundary. To open the box without the proper rites is not a simple act of disobedience. It is an invitation to chaos, believed to release uncontrolled spiritual energy into the world. The lock is a guardian of cosmic order, its simple, beautiful form a testament to a profound understanding that some things are kept secure not for their own protection but for ours. A Byzantine diplomat, draped in the heavy silks of his office, would entrust his most vital communications not to a simple scroll, but to a rigid, leather-covered case secured by an intricate metal lock. This was no ordinary container. Its surface was often embellished with the double-headed eagle, and its clasp was sealed with a dollop of wax impressed with the signet ring of the emperor himself. To a modern spy, the lock itself might seem like a challenge to be picked, a mechanical puzzle to be solved, but that perspective would be a fatal miscalculation. The lock's true purpose was not to be unpickable, but to be unbreakable in a political sense. Its elaborate design and the imperial seal were a clear, undeniable declaration. This message came from the very throne of Constantinople, and it was protected by the full weight of the empire's authority. The security was not in the iron of the mechanism, but in the certain, devastating retaliation that would follow any violation. An intercepted case with its seal intact was a diplomatic incident. An intercepted case with a broken seal was an act of war. The lock transformed the document inside from mere words into an extension of the emperor's will. Its power was derived from the absolute understanding that breaking it was not a technical feat, but a profound political crime, an insult that could shatter alliances and mobilize armies. This was a lock that served as a border, a tangible line in the sand that threatened any interloper with not just discovery, but with the complete collapse of their political standing. The click of its closure was the sound of sovereign power being invoked, a reminder that some barriers are upheld not by metal, but by the sheer force of reputation and consequence. Within the inner sanctum of a South Indian temple, the air thick with incense and devotion, a heavy sandalwood coffer sits near the idol of the deity. It overflows with gold ornaments and gemstones, offerings from countless devotees across centuries. To an outsider, this chest, secured by an ornate brass lock, appears to be the ultimate bank vault. Yet the philosophy that governs it turns this modern assumption on its head. The lock here serves a purpose far beyond physical security. The immense wealth inside is not considered the property of the temple or its priests. It belongs irrevocably to the god or goddess themselves. The lock, therefore, is not a tool for hoarding but a profound symbol of sacred stewardship. Its intricate mechanism and the rituals surrounding its opening and closing are a continuous public performance of responsibility. Every time a priest turns the key, it is an act of reverence, a declaration that they are merely temporary caretakers of the divine's property. The true function of the lock is to maintain an unbreakable chain of trust, a spiritual contract that stretches from the hands of the devotee who made the offering, through the priests who safeguard it, directly to the deity. This transforms the concept of security entirely. A broken lock would represent more than a theft. It would be a catastrophic rupture in that sacred trust, a spiritual crime that insults the divine and shatters the community's faith. The material loss of gold is almost secondary to the profound violation of the covenant the lock represents. Its strength is drawn from the collective belief that the treasures within are already accounted for, not on earthly ledgers, but in the cosmic balance sheet of the gods. While gold secured divine contracts in Indian temples, a far more earthly form of justice was being locked away in Anglo-Saxon England. Here, the price of a life was not a spiritual offering, but a precise, legally defined sum known as Wergild. Every person, from a noble to a farmer, had a value set upon their life. If a killing occurred, this blood price was to be paid by the perpetrator's family to the victim's kin, not as a punishment, but as a crucial alternative to the horror of an endless cycle of revenge killings. This payment was the community's desperate mechanism for preserving peace, and sometimes when the payment was immense or the reconciliation fragile, this Wergild was not handed over directly. It was placed inside a heavy, iron-bound community chest, secured with a formidable lock. The purpose of this lock was profoundly different from any vault. Its primary function was not to protect the coins from thieves, though that was a practical concern. The lock's true power was symbolic. The turning of the key was a definitive, public act. It signaled that the debt had been paid in full, that the legal obligation was satisfied, and that the matter was officially, irrevocably closed. The chest became a physical archive of reconciliation. The coins inside were almost irrelevant once the lock was fastened. Their value had been transformed from silver into social harmony. To break that lock and steal the contents would therefore be an act of catastrophic violence far beyond simple theft. It would be to shatter the peace, to tear up the legal contract, and to effectively declare the blood feud active once more. This was a lock that secured the very fabric of the community, its strength drawn not from its iron mechanism, but from the collective sigh of relief that followed its decisive click. The labyrinth at Knossos was not a fortress but a prison of mythic proportions. Its sprawling, winding corridors formed a lock of a completely different scale, an architectural puzzle designed not to keep invaders out, but to contain a terror within. The Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull born of a queen's transgression, was the dangerous secret at its heart. The security of this system was not brute force but pure psychological disorientation. Its endlessly turning paths and identical halls were a mechanism of confusion, a deliberate weapon against memory and reason. The monster could not escape because it was lost in a maze with no exit, a prisoner of the very structure built to hold it. This transforms the labyrinth from a simple building into a profound symbolic device. It represents an ancient blueprint for locking away the monstrous, the chaotic, and the parts of a kingdom's own history that were too dangerous to be let loose. The key to this immense lock was not a metal tool but the genius of its creator, Daedalus. He alone held the mental map, the secret of the single, true path that twisted through the deception. This knowledge made him the ultimate guardian. The story reveals a deep understanding that some threats are not external but internal, born from within a society itself, and that the most powerful locks are sometimes those we build to confine our own monsters. The labyrinth stands as a timeless metaphor for the structures we create to contain power, shame, or chaos, a reminder that the most formidable barriers are often those designed to keep something in, rather than someone out. A prayer wheel spins not to ask for a blessing, but to release one already stored inside. In the high, thin air of a Tibetan monastery, a massive, stationary prayer wheel stands as a silent reservoir of spiritual energy. Its cylindrical body, often beautifully painted, is designed to be rotated by pilgrims passing by. But before a hand can set it in motion, there is a small, almost humble act to perform. A simple leather latch or a loop of cord must be undone. This is the prayer wheel's lock. Its purpose is immediately misunderstood if we think it guards the rolled paper mantras tucked inside from theft. Those sacred scrolls, inscribed with countless repetitions of a phrase like Om Mani Padme Hum, hold no monetary value. The lock's true function is one of preservation and intention. It seals the sacred words away from the degrading touch of rain, wind, and dust, treating the physical object with the same reverence due to the divine power it represents. More profoundly, this simple fastener ritualizes the entire practice. The act of unlocking is the first, conscious step of devotion. It transforms a casual spin born of curiosity into a deliberate, focused prayer. You cannot set the wheel turning by accident. You must choose to engage, to become an active participant in a cycle of spiritual cause and effect. In this moment, the lock ceases to be a barrier and becomes a gateway. Each rotation of the wheel is believed to release the merit of the mantras inside, sending blessings out into the world. The lock, therefore, does not keep something out, it keeps something in. It secures this accumulated spiritual potency, this battery of good karma, until a practitioner intentionally comes to unlock and release it. This mechanism manages the flow of grace itself, ensuring that this sacred energy is dispensed not randomly, but only through the focused will of a devotee, turning a simple closure into a profound regulator of cosmic generosity. A stone stood at the edge of a field, unadorned and unimpressive to the eye. This was a Roman cippus, a boundary marker that held more legal and spiritual authority than any wall or fence. Its power did not lie in its physical substance, but in the words carved into its surface, a declaration that this line was drawn not merely by a farmer, but by the gods themselves. The inscription often invoked a curse, a promise of divine retribution against anyone foolish enough to displace the stone or violate the space it protected. This was a lock with no moving parts, a security system powered entirely by collective belief. The cippus transformed a simple property line into a sacred covenant. To cross it knowingly was not just trespass, it was an act of impiety, a direct challenge to the cosmic order that invited ruin upon oneself and one's family. The entire community became the enforcers of this lock, not with weapons but with shared conviction. Their fear of the curse and their understanding of the social and spiritual chaos that would follow its breach created an invisible, impenetrable barrier. The stone was merely the anchor for a force field of faith, proving that the most durable locks are sometimes those etched not in metal, but in the human soul. A simple story about a race between a tortoise and a hare is far more than it seems. This tale, like all of Aesop's fables, operates as a sophisticated conceptual lock. The narrative itself, with its memorable characters and vivid action, is the intricate mechanism. The moral, the lesson of slow and steady winning the race, is not handed out freely. It is the key hidden in plain sight. The security of this system is not against theft, but against passive reception. The meaning is deliberately protected from a casual listener who might hear the story and simply laugh at the boastful hare's failure. To truly access the lesson, the listener must actively participate, turning the events over in their mind, questioning the character's motivations, and drawing connections to their own life. This intellectual effort is the act of turning the key. The fable locks its wisdom inside a compelling package, ensuring that the lesson is not just heard, but earned through personal reflection. This ancient teaching method recognized a profound truth, that knowledge which is too easily given is often too easily forgotten. By securing a complex idea about perseverance within a simple story, the teacher guaranteed that only those willing to engage in the puzzle of its meaning would walk away with its true value. The security was against a simplistic understanding, a barrier designed to make the listener a co-creator of the insight. This transforms a children's story into a timeless device for safeguarding wisdom, proving that the most enduring locks are sometimes built not from wood or iron, but from the very structure of a tale itself. Even in death, the journey was not yet over. For an ancient Egyptian, the preservation of the body was only the first step toward eternal life. The most delicate and vital task was the protection of the internal organs, which were carefully removed during mummification. These were not discarded, but treated with the utmost reverence, for they were believed to be essential for the soul's existence in the afterlife. Each organ found its home in a dedicated canopic jar, a beautiful vessel often carved from alabaster or limestone. But the true magic, the true lock, was not the jar itself. It was the stopper. These were no ordinary lids. Each one was meticulously carved into the head of one of the 4 sons of Horus, powerful guardian deities. The stopper for the liver jar bore the face of Imseti, the lungs were protected by Hapi, the stomach by Duamutef, and the intestines by Kebesenuf. Yet these stoppers were not cemented in place with resin or secured with any mechanical fastener. Their seal was entirely ceremonial, a product of powerful magic. The act of placing the stopper atop the jar was a high ritual. As a priest settled the carved deity into its seat, he would recite a specific spell, a divine command that invoked the god's protective power. This spoken word was the lock. It transformed the simple physical barrier of the stopper into an impenetrable spiritual shield. The carved head was far more than a decoration. It was a conduit, a physical anchor for the divine guardian whose essence now enveloped the organ within. The jar became a sacred reliquary, its contents shielded not from grave robbers, but from decay, corruption, and malevolent forces that might seek to deny the soul its rebirth. This was a lock for eternity, its strength drawn not from stone, but from the unbreakable power of a spell. The click of this mechanism was not a sound, but a silence, the profound quiet of a promise made to the gods and kept, securing a person's very being for a journey beyond time. A sealed crucible held the dream of creation itself. In the dim, fire-lit workshop of a medieval alchemist, the most important apparatus was not the furnace or the bellows, but the simple, unbroken seal of clay or lute that encased a ceramic pot. Inside that vessel, a mixture of metals, salts, and mysterious ingredients simmered for days, weeks, or even years, subjected to intense heat. To an outsider, this seal might look like a primitive attempt at secrecy, a way to hide a secret formula from prying eyes. But the truth is far more fascinating. The seal was a vital component of the experiment itself, a lock designed not for the contents but for the process. Its primary function was to create a perfectly closed system, a miniature, self-contained universe where the laws of transformation could operate without interference from the outside world. The volatile spirits and essential vapors released by the heating materials had to be contained, forced to interact with each other in a cycle of death and rebirth. A broken seal meant a lost essence, a corrupted reaction. It was the difference between a successful transmutation and a worthless pile of ash. This lock was a guardian of potential. It secured the ideal conditions for a metamorphosis that was as much spiritual as it was chemical. The alchemist believed that by locking the crucible, they were not just protecting an object, but initiating a sacred event, sealing a covenant with the fundamental forces of nature. The click of this mechanism was the sound of a universe being created on a small scale. its integrity maintained until the precise moment when the great work was finally complete. A simple knot tied with intention can hold back the entire world. For many Native American peoples, the most profound lock was not forged from metal but woven from sinew or plant fiber, securing a collection of objects known as a medicine bundle. This was not a random assortment of items. It was a deeply personal and powerful assembly, a physical prayer containing perhaps an eagle feather gifted by an elder, a stone found in a vision, the claw of a bear, or a pinch of sacred tobacco. Each object carried its own story and spiritual significance, and when gathered together, their combined power was immense. The container itself, often made of deer hide or a square of woven cloth, was secondary to the closure. The true lock was the knot that held it all together. This was not a lock designed to resist a knife. Its purpose was far more subtle and potent. The knot served as a spiritual seal, a boundary that contained the sacred energy within the bundle, protecting it from being dissipated or corrupted by the casual influences of everyday life. It kept the power pure, concentrated, and ready for the moment it was truly needed. The right to untie this knot was a solemn responsibility, reserved only for the bundle's owner or a designated holy person. To open it without permission was not merely a trespass, it was a dangerous act of spiritual arrogance. The belief was clear: mishandling the bundle could unleash chaotic forces, bringing harm to the violator and disrupting the balance of the community. The security, therefore, was not physical but entirely relational, rooted in deep cultural respect and a shared understanding of the sacred. The simple act of tying the cord was an act of reverence, a way of saying that some powers are too great to be left unrestrained, and that true strength lies in knowing when and how to carefully release it. A gilded cabinet stands in a Renaissance scholar's study, its polished wood inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Inside rests a universe of marvels, a hummingbird's iridescent feather beside a piece of fossilized wood, a delicate astrolabe next to a carved coral branch. The ornate brass lock on its door is a masterpiece in itself, yet its true purpose defies the simple logic of a vault. This was not a lock designed to repel thieves, but to orchestrate awe. The wealthy collector who owned this cabinet held the key not as a property owner, but as a master of ceremonies. When a distinguished guest arrived, the unlocking was a performance. The turn of the key was a signal that a privileged viewing was about to commence. The owner would then open the doors and guide their visitor on a curated journey, pointing out the strange and the wondrous, explaining the origins of a narwhal tusk said to be from a unicorn, or the medicinal properties of a rare beetle. The lock's function was to control the narrative. It ensured that the experience of wonder was not random or self-directed, but carefully managed. By controlling access, the owner demonstrated their role as a gatekeeper of global knowledge, a person of immense sophistication who could decipher the world's secrets. The security here was not for the objects, but for the social prestige and intellectual authority they represented. An unlocked cabinet could be browsed by anyone, its mysteries diluted. A locked one promised a personal revelation, with the collector as the sole interpreter. The click of the lock was the starting pistol for a spectacle of worldly power, transforming a simple collection into a theater where the owner was always the star. And so we arrive at the final and perhaps most profound lock of all, one that has no physical form yet holds immense power over every human life. It is a lock built not from iron or stone, but from shadows and illusion. In his timeless allegory of the cave, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato presents a locked realm of the mind. Prisoners are chained from birth deep inside a cavern, forced to stare at a wall where flickering shadows dance. They believe these shadows are the entirety of reality, naming them and building their lives around these illusions. The chains that bind them are the ultimate locking mechanism. But they are not designed to keep intruders away from a treasure. Their purpose is the exact opposite, to keep the prisoners securely inside a prison of ignorance. This lock does not protect a physical space, but a state of being, a comfortable yet completely false understanding of the world. The security of this system is terrifyingly effective because the prisoners do not even know they are locked in. They have no concept of a key, no desire for escape. The cave is their entire universe. The key, as Plato reveals, is not a metal object that can be stolen or forged. It is the painful, difficult, and disruptive process of philosophical enlightenment. It begins when one prisoner is freed from their chains and forced to turn around. They see the fire behind them, the puppets that cast the shadows, and they understand the elaborate deception. But the true unlocking happens when they are dragged out of the cave entirely, into the blinding light of the sun. This journey represents education in its purest form, a brutal confrontation with truth that shatters a lifetime of comfortable lies. The allegory transforms the very idea of a lock. Here, the mechanism secures a false reality, and its entire purpose is to be overcome. The greatest challenge is not breaking the physical chains, which are merely a symbol, but having the courage to question everything you have ever known. This conceptual lock challenges each of us to find the key within ourselves, to constantly seek the light beyond the comforting shadows on our own cave walls. It asks a question that echoes through the ages: are we brave enough to turn the key? This pattern, repeated across tombs, temples, and treasuries, reveals a profound truth about the ancient world. The physical lock itself was almost always the simplest part of the equation. A wooden bolt, a knotted cord, a clay seal. These were not engineering masterpieces. Their power was never meant to be mechanical. Instead, they acted as a focal point, a tangible representation of a barrier that was infinitely stronger because it existed in the human mind and spirit. The real security system was the collective agreement, the shared belief in what would happen if that simple, symbolic mechanism was violated. A society that truly believes a broken seal will bring a curse upon their family does not need a steel door. A community that understands that moving a boundary stone is an offense against the gods requires no barbed wire. The lock was the trigger for a much larger consequence, a psychological and spiritual tripwire connected to an immense weight of fear, honor, or faith. This reflects a world view where the invisible forces of the cosmos, the will of the gods, and the integrity of the social fabric were as real and as consequential as any stone wall. The apparent fragility of these devices was not a design flaw, it was a deliberate feature. It made any violation a conscious, undeniable act. There was no accident, no plausible deniability. To break such a lock was to stare directly into the face of the taboo you were breaking, whether it was divine wrath, social exile, or spiritual chaos. The strength of the lock was directly proportional to the strength of the belief behind it. When that belief faded, when societies began to prioritize individual gain over collective consequence, the nature of the lock had to change. It had to become stronger in a physical sense, because the metaphysical barriers that once held people back were no longer enough. The evolution from the symbolic seal to the unpickable tumbler lock is, in many ways, the story of a world learning to trust metal more than it trusted men. From the clay bullae of Mesopotamia to the symbolic knots of Celtic artisans, we have traced a history not of security, but of human intention. These 25 ancient mechanisms teach us a profound lesson, that the concept of protection is deeply, fundamentally cultural. What a society chooses to lock away, and the manner in which it does so, acts as a mirror reflecting its most deeply held values, whether they are spiritual, social, or intellectual. The flimsy wooden bolt on an Egyptian tomb was stronger than any fortress wall because it was backed by the entire weight of a cosmic order. The simple knot on a medicine bundle held more power than a steel chain because it was tied with the threads of sacred tradition. For our ancestors, the most valuable things were not gold or jewels, but vows, knowledge, balance, and honor. These were the treasures they felt were truly worth securing. The next time you turn a key in a modern lock, remember that you are participating in an ancient ritual, but pause for a moment and consider what you are truly protecting. Is it merely a possession, or is it something more, a promise, a memory, a sense of safety? Perhaps the greatest locks are not those forged from iron, but those built from the invisible materials of ideas, beliefs, and the shared agreements that quietly hold our world together. If this journey into the symbolic heart of ancient security has intrigued you, we would love to hear which of these mechanisms fascinated you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments below.